The white envelope trembled faintly in Dr. Phil's hands. The studio, usually buzzing with excitement, was now completely still. Every camera operator, every member of the audience, and every producer behind the glass seemed frozen. In over 2 decades of broadcasting, Dr. Phil had never halted a show like this. Yet what he was about to reveal would permanently alter 2 lives. What followed became one of the most memorable moments in television history. It all began 3 weeks earlier. Sarah Mitchell, 34, a single mother from Ohio, had sent an urgent request to the Dr. Phil show. Her case appeared simple. She was looking for her biological father, a man she had never met. Her mother had passed away the previous year, taking most of the truth with her. Sarah only had a name, a faded photograph dated 1989, and a deep need to uncover her roots. "My mother said he didn't want to be found," Sarah had explained during her pre-interview. "But I have to know where I come from. My daughter deserves to understand her family history." The show's research team began their investigation and soon identified a possible match: Robert Chin, 56, a high school teacher living in California. When producers reached out to him, his response was unexpected. "I don't know anyone named Sarah Mitchell," he said, clearly confused. "I've never even been to Ohio. There must be a mistake." Still, he agreed to take a DNA test. "If she needs closure," he told them, "I'll do whatever it takes to prove I'm not the person she's looking for." Dr. Phil paused midway through his reading. The atmosphere in the studio grew heavier. The day of filming had finally arrived. Sarah sat in the guest chair, her hands tightly clasped, knuckles pale with tension. Her 12-year-old daughter, Emma, waited backstage with a producer. Sarah had insisted Emma stay off stage. She feared what might happen if the truth was painful. Dr. Phil began with his usual straightforward tone. "Sarah, you've been searching for your father for 16 years. You've faced dead ends, false leads, and disappointments. But today, we might finally have some answers." Sarah nodded silently, every muscle tense with nervous hope. "Your mother told you your father's name was Robert Chin," Dr. Phil continued. "She showed you one photograph and said he was a college student she met at Ohio State University in 1989. Is that correct?" "Yes," Sarah whispered. "She said they dated for 3 months. When she told him she was pregnant, he left. She said he didn't want anything to do with us." The audience murmured softly, sensing the weight of her story. It was a familiar theme for the show: lost fathers, abandoned children, and the lifelong search for identity and closure. Dr. Phil then turned toward the second guest chair, where Robert Chin sat, looking sincerely puzzled. "Robert," he said, "you've told our producers you've never attended Ohio State. You went to UCLA instead. Is that right? You've never dated anyone named Mitchell, correct?" "That's correct," Robert replied, his tone calm but firm. "Dr. Phil," he added, "I truly feel sorry for Sarah and what she's going through, but there's clearly been a misunderstanding. I've never even been to Ohio." Off camera, Dr. Phil made a move no one on the production team saw coming. "Hold on," he said, raising his hand. He turned directly toward the camera, breaking standard studio protocol. "We ran the DNA test 3 days ago," Dr. Phil continued. "The results came in yesterday, and our production team verified them twice. What I'm about to say, none of us were prepared for." The audience leaned forward. Sarah's breathing quickened. Robert shifted uneasily in his chair. A production assistant stepped onto the stage and handed Dr. Phil a white envelope. He took it but didn't open it right away. "Before I read these results," Dr. Phil said, lowering his voice, "I want both of you to understand. Whatever comes next will change your lives. Sarah, you came here searching for your father. Robert, you came here to prove you're not him. But sometimes, the truth turns out more complex than we expect." Dr. Phil slowly opened the envelope, scanning the pages inside. His normally steady expression shifted. "You came seeking a father. You found both a father and an uncle. Your daughter discovered a grandfather and a great-uncle. This wasn't a mistake, it was a miracle." The show went to commercial, but the cameras continued recording for another 20 minutes as the family talked, cried, and began to absorb what had just happened. Later, Dr. Phil would tell his wife Robin that it was one of the most profound moments of his career. "You plan for certain outcomes," he explained. "You prepare for emotional reactions, but you can never fully anticipate the moment when science and human longing come together to create something extraordinary." The episode aired 6 weeks later and became the most-watched Dr. Phil episode of the season. It sparked conversations about adoption, the importance of DNA testing, and the power of persistence and hope. More than that, it reminded millions of viewers of a simple truth. Family isn't only who you know. Sometimes it's who you haven't met yet. 6 months later, an update segment showed David, Robert, and Sarah together at Margaret's bedside in San Francisco. Facing her final months, the elderly woman wept as she held both of her sons' hands for the first time since infancy. "I thought I'd die with this regret," Margaret said on camera. "I never imagined I'd see them again. Thank you, Dr. Phil, for giving me this gift." She passed away 3 weeks later, surrounded by the family she feared she'd lost forever. Dr. Phil kept the white envelope from that episode in his office, not as a trophy, but as a reminder. The envelope contained 3 pieces of paper, but more importantly, it held answers to decades of questions. It represented healing. It represented connection. And it reinforced a belief he's always held. The truth, no matter how complex, is always worth pursuing. The story didn't end there. David and Robert grew close as brothers separated for 56 years could become. They discovered shared interests, similar habits, and even the same terrible jokes. Sarah and Emma became part of both families, celebrated at holidays, welcomed at birthdays. Each year on the anniversary of that taping, David, Robert, and Sarah send Dr. Phil the same message. Thank you for not giving up on the truth. Sometimes, the most powerful action is simply holding a white envelope, pausing mid-show, and having the courage to reveal its contents, even when the outcome is uncertain. The impact of that single episode reached far beyond the studio. In the weeks after it aired, the show received over 50,000 messages from viewers. Adoption agencies reported a 300% increase in reunion inquiries, and DNA testing companies saw sales rise sharply. Most importantly, families across the country began addressing conversations they had long avoided. Dr. Phil's team received a particularly touching letter from a woman in Texas. "I watched your show with my adopted son," she wrote. "He was afraid to search for his birth family, worried it would hurt me. After seeing your episode, he asked for my help. Last week, we found his biological mother. Thank you for showing us that love doesn't divide, it multiplies." The episode won a Daytime Emmy for Outstanding Talk Show. During his acceptance speech, Dr. Phil didn't focus on production or storytelling. He spoke about Sarah, David, and Robert. "Television at its best doesn't just entertain," he said from the stage. "It connects. It heals. It reminds us we're not alone in our struggles or our searches." That white envelope contained more than test results. It held hope. And hope, as he often reflects, is one of the most powerful forces in the universe. Years later, the legacy continues. Robert Chin retired from teaching and now volunteers with an organization that helps adoptees locate biological families. David Chin wrote a book about his journey, with proceeds supporting adoption reunion nonprofits. Sarah Mitchell became a DNA counselor, guiding others through the emotional complexities of genetic testing. Emma, the 12-year-old who met her grandfather on live TV, is now studying genetics in college. "I want to help families find each other," she told a reporter. "Just like Dr. Phil helped mine." The white envelope remains in Dr. Phil's office, now framed beside a photograph from Margaret Chen's bedside reunion. Visitors often ask about it, and he always answers the same way. "That's the day I learned that sometimes the best thing you can do as a host is stop hosting and simply be human." The white envelope Dr. Phil said suddenly in Dr. Phil's hands. The instruction caught everyone off guard. Usually the control room hesitated to react. Was now completely Cameras
still.
kept rolling
Every
as
camera
Dr. Phil
operator,
stepped away
every
from
member
the
of
stage,
the audience,
speaking
and every
quietly
producer
with his
behind the
executive
glass
producer
seemed frozen.
"I need to speak to
In
them
over 2
separately
decades
before
of
we
broadcasting,
he said
Dr.
firmly.
Phil had never
This is
halted a
much
show
bigger
like
than we
this.
thought. Yet what he
The
was about
audience
to reveal
murmured
would
in
permanently
confusion.
alter
Sarah
two
began to
lives.
cry.
What
Unsure
followed
what was
became
happening.
one of the most
Robert stood
memorable
up,
moments in
visibly
television
tense.
history.
Dr.
It all
Phil,
began 3
Sarah
weeks
called out.
earlier.
"Please,
Sarah Mitchell,
just tell me.
34,
I can
a
handle
single
it."
mother from
Dr.
Ohio,
Phil returned to
had
the
sent
stage
an urgent
and
request
sat on the
to the
coffee
Dr.
table
Phil
between
show.
them.
Her
A
gesture
gesture
he
he was
reserved
simple.
for serious
She was looking for her
conversations.
biological father,
Sarah, a man
Robert,
she had
he
never
began
met.
slowly.
Her mother had
The
passed
DNA
away
test
the previous
confirmed
year,
something significant.
taking most of the truth
Robert
with
is not
her.
your father.
Sarah only
Sarah
had
broke
a name.
down.
A
"I knew
faded
it," she
photograph
cried.
dated
"I knew it was too
1989
good to be
and
true."
a deep need
Wait,
to uncover
Dr.
her
Phil
roots.
said.
My mother
raising a
said he
hand.
didn't want to be found.
"There's more,"
Sarah
looked
had
at Robert.
explained during her
"You're not her
pre-interview.
father,
But I have to
according
know
to
where
the
I come
test,
from. My daughter
uncle.
deserves to
The
understand
words
her
stunned
family history.
everyone.
The
What?
show's
Sarah
research team
gasped.
began their
Robert's
investigation
mouth fell
and
open.
soon identified a possible
he
match.
stammered.
Robert
I don't have
Chin,
any siblings,
56. He
A
stopped.
high school
His
teacher
expression
living in
changing.
California.
Dr.
When
Phil,
producers reached
Robert
out
said
to him,
slowly.
his
I
response
was
was
adopted when I
unexpected.
was 3
I
months
don't know
old.
anyone named
I've never
Sarah
met my
Mitchell,
biological
he said,
parents.
clearly confused.
Dr. Phil leaned forward.
I've never even been
Robert,
to Ohio.
the DNA
There
results
must be a
show you
mistake.
and Sarah share
Still,
roughly 25%
he agreed to take a
of
DNA
your
test.
DNA.
If
That's
she needs
typical of an
closure,
aunt,
he
uncle,
told
or
them.
grandparent.
I'll do whatever it takes to
relationship.
prove I'm not
Given
the
your
person she's
ages,
looking for.
the most likely
Dr. Phil
explanation
paused
is that
midway
Sarah's
through his
biological
reading.
father
The
is
atmosphere
your
in the
biological
studio grew
brother.
heavier.
Sarah
The day
and
of
Robert
filming
stared
had
at each
finally
other,
arrived.
speechless.
Sarah sat
I
in
have
the
a brother,
guest chair.
Robert whispered.
Her hands tightly
My
clasped.
father has been searching
Knuckles
for you.
pale with tension.
Sarah said softly.
Her 12-year-old
realization
daughter, Emma,
spreading across
waited
her face.
backstage with a
Dr.
producer.
Phil then pulled
Sarah
out
had
another
insisted
document.
Emma stay
After
offstage.
receiving these results,
She feared what
our
might
team
happen if the
contacted
truth was
the adoption
painful.
agency
Dr.
that
Phil
handled your
began
case.
with his usual
Robert,
straightforward
we
tone.
matched the records
Sarah,
and found
you've been
something.
searching for your
He
father
handed
for
Robert a
16
photocopy
years.
of an old
You've
document.
faced dead ends,
In
false
1968,
leads,
and
a woman named
disappointments.
Margaret Chin
But today,
gave birth
we
to
might
twin
finally
boys
have some
in San
answers.
Francisco.
Sarah nodded
She was
silently.
17. Every
She
muscle
kept one,
tense with nervous
David,
hope.
and placed
Your
the
mother
other,
told you your father's
you,
name
Robert,
was Robert
for
Chin.
adoption.
Dr. Phil
Robert's
continued.
hands trembled as
She
he
showed
read.
you one photograph.
David Chin
and said he was a
Dr. Phil
college student
continued.
she met
Moved
at
to
Ohio
Ohio
State University
in
1989 to attend Ohio
Is that correct?
State University.
Yes,
He
Sarah
graduated in
whispered.
1991.
She said they dated for
and
3
married in
months.
1995.
When she told him she
And
was
Sarah,
pregnant,
he's been
he
looking
left.
for you, too.
She said he didn't want anything to do with us.
The audience murmured softly, sensing the weight of her story. It was a familiar theme for the show: lost fathers, abandoned children, and the lifelong search for identity and closure. Dr. Phil then turned toward the second guest chair, where Robert Chin sat, looking sincerely puzzled. Robert, he said, you've told our producers you've never attended Ohio State. You went to UCLA instead. Is that right? You've never dated anyone named Mitchell, correct? That's correct, Robert replied, his tone calm but firm. Dr. Phil, he added, I truly feel sorry for Sarah and what she's going through, but there's clearly been a misunderstanding. I've never even been to Ohio. Off camera, Dr. Phil made a move no one on the production team saw coming. Hold on, he said, raising his hand. He turned directly toward the camera, breaking standard studio protocol. We ran the DNA test 3 days ago, Dr. Phil continued. The results came in yesterday, and our production team verified them twice. What I'm about to say, none of us were prepared for. The audience leaned forward. Sarah's breathing quickened. Robert shifted uneasily in his chair. A production assistant stepped onto the stage and handed Dr. Phil a white envelope. He took it, but didn't open it right away. Before I read these results, Dr. Phil said, lowering his voice, I want both of you to understand. Whatever comes next will change your lives. Sarah, you came here searching for your father. Robert, you came here to prove you're not him. But sometimes, the truth turns out more complex than we expect. Dr. Phil slowly opened the envelope, scanning the pages inside. His normally steady expression shifted. What? Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. Dr. Phil gave a small nod to the production assistant. Bring him in. The side door of the studio opened, and a man in his 50s walked onto the stage. He had Robert's eyes, Robert's nose, and Robert's kind smile. Sarah stood up, so quickly her chair nearly fell. Dad, David Chin's eyes filled with tears. Sarah, they met at the center of the stage, their embrace so genuine and heartfelt that half the audience began to cry. Then David looked up and saw Robert. The two men stood just a few feet apart, reflections of each other separated by time. I didn't know, David said, his voice shaking. I didn't know I had a brother. Neither did I, Robert replied softly. Dr. Phil stepped back, giving space for the moment. The cameras captured every second, Sarah crying in her father's arms, the brothers slowly moving toward each other, and the audience overwhelmed by the magnitude of what they were witnessing. When the show resumed, Dr. Phil brought out Emma from backstage. The 12-year-old's reaction to meeting her grandfather and great-uncle at the same time was even more emotional than the first reveal. We conducted a full verification, Dr. Phil explained to the audience, his professional tone returning, though his voice still carried emotion. We contacted Margaret Chin, now 74 and still alive. She confirmed everything. She said she was told her babies would stay together, but the agency separated them. She's carried that guilt for 56 years. He turned to David. Tell us what happened with Sarah. David, still holding his daughter's hand, spoke quietly. Her mother, Jennifer,
and I dated for 5 months, not 3. When she got pregnant, I panicked. I was 22, barely employed, buried in student debt. I told her I needed some time to think. He paused, wiping his eyes. When I came back 2 weeks later to tell her I wanted to be there, to be a father, she was gone. She'd moved, changed her number. I searched for years, Sarah. I never stopped. She told me you didn't want me, Sarah said through tears. I wanted you more than anything, David replied. I just needed 2 weeks to figure things out, and it cost me 34 years. Dr. Phil looked into the camera. Jennifer Mitchell passed away last year, so we'll never know why she told Sarah her father had abandoned them. But what we do know is this: 3 people who thought they were alone have just found their family. He turned to Robert. You've spent your life wondering about your biological roots. You're a teacher. You guide children every day. And today, you discovered you have a twin brother and a niece. Robert, who had been silent, finally spoke. I teach biology, he said with a tearful laugh. I teach genetics, heredity, DNA, and I never imagined, he glanced at David, I'd become part of a real-life example. The audience laughed and cried at once. Dr. Phil then shifted to his closing remarks. Margaret Chin has agreed to a reunion. She's living in a nursing home in San Francisco and wants to meet all 3 of you. Our show will make that happen and cover all travel expenses. He looked toward Sarah.